Hey everybody, this is a review of the midterm review assignment for Econ 1A, Principles of Macroeconomics. So we have our midterm on Monday, and I wanted to make sure I answered the questions that are on the midterm review. It is extra credit, but it's also a nice review of just some of the types of problems and some of the problems you might see on the midterm, and I didn't want there to be any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and go over all those problems for you, and we'll talk about them and hopefully answer any questions you might have. So the first problem on there is a review of two things: our production function and our determinants of productivity. So question number 1 says, using the production function for national production, y equals, and let's write it up here for ourselves, y equals a and a function of physical capital, human capital, natural resources, and labor. Give an example of a government policy that might increase production through an increase in A. And so when we're talking about A, we want to remember we're not talking about a single piece of technological equipment. So some people might think A means computers. Yes and no, right? We're not talking about buying computers for firms. We're talking about the effect of the invention of computers for society. So when we think about A, technological advances, we really mean some kind of innovation that affects everything. That's why A is on the outside, because A has the ability to make every other input more efficient. So again, think about computers. The invention of computers made people more efficient, machineries more efficient. It made natural resources. We're able to use our natural resources more efficiently because we put computers in our cars and computers in the equipment that helps us to harvest fisheries and those kinds of things. And so it really applies out to everything. It makes education more efficient, training more efficient. And so that's what we want to think with technological advancement. And so if you remember, we talked about different policies that affect technological advancement. We can think about things like, I'm going to find a nice pen here that's not too crummy. There's not one. All right. We could think about increasing just the sheer number of people. That can help increase technological advancement. More people, more ideas, more possibility for innovation. We can think about maybe subsidizing human capital and education as a way to get to that innovation. We can think about things like property rights, especially intellectual property rights. I might not be willing to discover a cure for cancer unless I know I'm going to be able to get rewarded for that. So, property rights. Also, we can think about funding, maybe grants for research. Stuff that's going to lead to the next big thing. Think about the difference between dial-up internet and high-speed internet. Think about the difference between a flip phone and a smartphone. That's what we mean when we mean technological advancement, is we mean something that has a huge impact on every aspect of life, or at least a lot of aspects of life, right? So creating a typewriter, the printing press, right? These are the kinds of things that we're talking about with A. So it's not going to be a tax cut, probably, unless it's a tax cut that somehow benefits innovation and scientific research. It's not going to be buying stuff. It's going to be something that creates the potential for new major technological advancement. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. A is different from all of these others. K, we talked about savings and investment credits that can try and increase the firm's willingness to invest in physical capital. H, same thing. What do we do to incentivize investments in human capital? Things like programs that incentivize education, training, job training programs, that kind of stuff. Natural resources, it's a little tricky. It's hard to increase your natural resources. You kind of either have them or you don't, but maybe you could do them more efficiently, treat them more efficiently. And then labor force. There's a lot of effects, right? There's 3 effects. Labor force can dilute the physical capital, dilute the human capital. It can also dilute natural resources, but it can also lead to higher levels of innovation because more people, more ideas. Cool. Hopefully that is a nice review of productivity. The next few questions are multiple choice questions, so I'm going to read them and then talk about them. Question 2 says, institutions that help match one person's savings with another person's investment are collectively called A, the Federal Reserve System, B, the banking system, C, the monetary system, or D, the financial system. And this is one of those questions that you kind of just have to know, but it is the financial system, D. The financial system is the system that connects borrowers with savers, and that's a really important system. It functions in a really interesting way right now, but initially what it was conceived as is sort of a information saving system, because you might not know, a great example is getting student loans, right? If you needed money to fund your education, you could go around and ask, like, do a GoFundMe and ask all your friends and family and neighbors, will you help me save for college? Will you loan me money for college? Or we have a financial system where an organization, a government organization or a private organization in that financial system says, hey, we've looked at what you're trying to do and we've decided you're creditworthy. And so we've taken money from someone else who trusts us and we're going to trust you with it. And that's what the financial system does. It does the information parts of connecting borrowers with savers. And so that's why it's a really valuable system. The Federal Reserve is our central bank. We'll talk about that more after the midterm. The banking system is part of the financial system, but the financial system is much bigger than just the banking system. And the monetary system is kind of a made-up phrase, so not the right answer. Hopefully that makes sense. Do remember within the financial system, there's direct finance where the borrowers and savers know each other. So buying stocks, for example. And then there's indirect finance. And that's going to be when you don't know who's borrowing from you or who the saver you're getting money from. And so that's going to be putting money into a bank, borrowing money from a bank, and mutual funds. Okay. Number 3, which of the following is an example of a normative statement? The U.S. GDP is currently $18.57 trillion. The U.S. tends to have a trade deficit. The U.S. should eliminate its trade deficit. The U.S. trade deficit is rising. This question is a little older, so the U.S. GDP is no longer $18.57 trillion. But regardless of that, a normative statement is a statement about the way one believes the world should be. A positive statement is a statement of fact. A positive statement doesn't have to be true. It just has to be provable or disprovable. And so whether GDP is 18.5 trillion or not, it's something we can test. We can say yes or no, that is or is not true. Same for the trade deficit. We do tend to have a trade deficit. More years than not, more quarters than not, the US imports more than it exports. And the trade deficit is rising. C is the correct answer. It's a normative statement because it's not a statement of fact. Whether or not the U.S. should eliminate a trade deficit is an opinion. It can't be proven one way or the other. It depends on what your priorities and goals are. And so that's what makes it a normative statement, right? It's got the word should in it. It's not a provable fact. It's an opinion. So that's the kind of statement that an economist as a policymaker might make, basically saying, given what I know, this is what I believe to be true. Hopefully that helps. Number 4, a person who has had a job as an engineer but is fired and then gets a new job working at Del Taco is considered unemployed, employed, not in the labor force, discouraged worker. These kinds of questions are just trying to get at those definitions of those terms and what it means, how different working situations affect the unemployment rate. In this case, someone loses a job but immediately gets a job, but it's not as good a job. And this is supposed to sort of illuminate one of the shortcomings of the unemployment rate, because the correct answer is this person is considered employed, B. They are underemployed, right? They don't have a job that matches their skills, abilities, training, whatever. They might not be making nearly as much money. Maybe it's part-time work instead of full-time work, but so long as they have a job, the unemployment rate considers them employed. So even though the person's employment status from their perspective has changed, from the point of view of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the unemployment rate, their status has not changed. So they are employed. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Remember, unemployed is without a job and looking for work. Not in the labor force is no longer looking for work, not interested in employment, something like that. Maybe a student doing, maybe somebody who's a stay-at-home parent. And a discouraged worker is an example of someone not in the labor force. Okay, next one is our seasonal question. A student who chooses to attend a Halloween party on the Sunday night before their midterm faces what opportunity cost? A, the cost of their Halloween costume. B, the value of their next best option. C, the wrath of their macro professor. Or D, the lost wages they could have earned at work on a Sunday night. And there's a little bit of a trick in here because the cost of the Halloween costume is not opportunity cost. That's an explicit cost paid. Wrath of the macro professor, that's an explicit cost. That's not an opportunity cost. An opportunity cost is something you give up to do something else. The lost wages could be the opportunity cost, but the best answer in this case is the value of their next best option. It's a Sunday night. They might need to study for their midterm on Monday. They might need to sleep. They might want to spend time with family and friends or go trick-or-treating. Or they might have wages that they could have earned on Sunday night. But the best answer is the value of their next best option, B, because that's the opportunity cost. In every situation, it's whatever the value of your next best option is, and you get to pick what that is based on your preferences. So maybe on a Sunday night, you would never go to work, but you would study or have a quiet night getting ready for the week or sleep. And so whatever the next best option is, that's the opportunity cost. If you go to the party, it's what you would have done instead. Does that make sense? So it could be the wages, but the better answer that captures everybody's opportunity cost is the value of their next best option, because that's truly what opportunity cost is. Opportunity cost is the value of the next best option. Cool. Okay. 6. If a country is able to produce a good at a lower opportunity cost, they have A, a comparative advantage, B, the absolute advantage, C, gains from trade, or D, all of the above. In this situation, the answer is A, the comparative advantage. Opportunity cost determines comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is defined as the lowest opportunity cost. We have no idea about the absolute or explicit cost associated with producing this good. We don't know if this good is being produced using dollars or labor hours or something, and we don't know whether or not they produce it using the lowest quantity of that thing. And that's what absolute cost is, or absolute advantage. Absolute advantage is producing it at the lowest absolute cost, the fewest labor hours, the fewest materials, the least amount of money. We don't know. So there's no way of knowing whether this country has B. And so we can't say D because we don't know. We know B's not. We don't know if B is true. And then C, gains from trade. Yeah, gains from trade do emerge from comparative advantage. But in this case, the best answer is the comparative advantage, because that's what we're sure about. We're sure that this firm or this country has the comparative advantage because they have the lowest opportunity cost. The gains from trade, we assume, will emerge from the comparative advantage, but we can't say with certainty because we just don't have a lot of information. This question only tells us one thing: lowest opportunity cost. That's comparative advantage. Lowest opportunity cost is comparative advantage. Yes, maybe gains from trade. Yes, maybe absolute advantage, but certainly lowest opportunity cost is comparative advantage. So that is the best correct answer. The next problem, the next 3 problems are the larger graphing problems. This one's a really important one. Number 7 asks you to consider the closed economy of Sacktown and using measures for GDP, consumption, government expenditure, and taxes, determine private savings and public savings and investment, and then graph the market for loanable funds and determine the equilibrium assuming an interest rate of 3%. So this is a really great example to practice for the midterm, and let's do it together because this is something that I want everyone to be sure they know how to do. Let me find my eraser. I could not find my eraser, but that's okay. This will work. Looks like my eraser is pretty dirty anyway. Okay, so there we go. All right, this is not productive for my students studying macroeconomics, but this is very productive for my poor whiteboard that's been through a lot through the last 2 years. My poor pandemic bailout whiteboard. Okay. So we have some information given by the problem that I'm going to outline first, and then we will calculate private savings, public savings, and investment. So we have GDP, which is equal to Y, which is our national income, which is $14,000. We have consumption is equal to 6,500. And we have government spending is equal to, or government expenditure is 1,700. And then the problem gives you the national income identity, the private savings equation, and the public savings equation. So national income is Y equals C plus I plus G plus NX, which, C plus I plus G, because we're doing the closed economy. We also know that national savings is equal to private plus public, which is equal to Y minus C minus T plus T minus G. And so with all this, we can get everything we need for this problem to go ahead and build our equilibrium market for loanable funds. So we'll start with calculating private savings and public savings, and then we'll calculate investment. We want to remember that in equilibrium, national savings will also be equal to investment. Because if we solve this in terms of I, we get C plus I plus G equals Y minus C minus G. Investment is equal to Y minus C, the T's cancel out, minus G. Does that make sense? This is important. So if you're having a hard time with this, sorry, I don't know if you can see that all. If you're having a hard time with this, you're going to want to go back and review the slides and really make sure you're comfortable with this information, because this is an important problem. It's an important idea, and it's one of those things that's not going away. We're going to use the market for loanable funds a lot more when we start to talk about macro policy going forward. So let me pull this a little bit back closer, trying to make sure everybody can see everything. I'm going to take these away because we know what these are, and I'm going to go ahead and calculate public and private savings. Okay. So, public savings is taxes minus government spending. The residents of Sacktown paid, according to the problem, $1,450 in taxes. So that means that public savings is going to be taxes minus government expenditure, or $1,450 minus $1,700. That's going to give us negative $250. So our public savings is negative. That means this government is running a budget deficit, right? Private savings is households. It's everything people don't spend on consumption and taxes. So it's the national income, 14,000, minus taxes, 1,450, minus consumption spending, 6,500. And that makes sense, right? Private savings is everything that doesn't go to stuff you buy and the taxes you pay. So it's money left over in your checking account, money left over in your savings account. If you buy a bond or a stock, all of that counts as savings. So we go ahead and count. So that's going to be 14,000 minus 1,450 minus 6,500 is $6,050. Okay? National savings then is private plus public, so it's going to be $6,050 plus negative $250, or let me pop that in my calculator. $5,800. And we can double check this by remembering our accounting identity, remembering that investment is equal to Y minus C minus G is also equal to national savings. So let's go ahead and check that. Investment is equal to Y minus C minus G. So 14,000 minus 6,500 minus 1,700 gives us, again, 5,800. So we are right. We are right. We've got all the numbers, right? We've got public savings, private savings, national savings. There we go. Public savings, private savings, national savings, and investment. Cool? And it all works out, right? All the numbers go together. So now all we have to do is part B, graph the market for loanable funds using the total value of loanable funds in equilibrium and an equilibrium interest rate of 3%. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of all of this, remembering that my investment is $5,800, and graph this out. Okay, this tissue has not much life left in it, but that's okay. So the market for loanable funds is in XY space, where we have the quantity of loanable funds and the interest rate. And then we have some demand for loanable funds that is downward sloping. And remember, demand for loanable funds is that investment spending. And then the supply of loanable funds, that comes from national savings. So national savings creates the supply of loanable funds. If something affects private or public savings, it's going to affect the supply of loanable funds. That's super important to remember that. Now we have our equilibrium quantity of loanable funds. That's that $5,800. That's equal to investment, which is also equal to national savings. And then the problem says that the equilibrium interest rate is 3%. Cool? Pretty easy, right? Pretty straightforward, hopefully. Hopefully it's a nice review. All right, next problem up. Graph the production possibilities frontier for a company that has 1,000 labor hours and can make either cell phones or tablets, using 100 hours to make tablets, 50 hours to make cell phones. Mark a point that is efficient, a point that is impossible, or inefficient, impossible, and then a reasonable production point. So this is a little bit of a way back. We haven't done production possibilities frontiers in a while, so it's a good review and a reminder of how to do them and why they're important. And this is just to kind of remind you, oh yeah, that's a thing I want to remember. So production possibilities. This is a pretty simple problem, hopefully, for a production possibilities frontier. We have 1,000 hours, and we can use 100 to make a tablet, or 50 to make a cell phone. It doesn't matter which end you put it on. You want to graph your production possibilities frontier with one good on one axis and the other good on the other. So I'm just going to put cell phones here and tablets up here. And then the 1,000 hours can be divided by 100 or 50 to get my two endpoints. You can calculate a couple of combinations if you want. It's up to you how you want to do it. The point is just to derive a production possibilities frontier in a fairly easy, simple way. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take that 1,000 labor hours and say, okay, if all I did in 1,000 hours was make tablets, 1,000 hours divided by 100 hours to make a tablet means I could make 10 tablets. In 1,000 hours, I could spend 100 hours on a tablet, on each tablet, and make 10 tablets. I'm going to put it here. On the other hand, in that 1,000 hours, if I spent each of those 1,000 hours making a cell phone, it's going to take 50 hours to make each cell phone. So 1,000 divided by 50 means I could make 20 cell phones. I could also split it up and say, okay, 500 hours for tablets, 500 hours for cell phones. I could make 5 tablets and 10 cell phones. Either way, my production possibilities frontier is all the possible combinations of goods I could make, from all cell phones to all tablets and everything in between. You see that? Now, a point that is inefficient is going to be anything below this line. So it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here. Any point below the line is going to be inefficient because we could have more of everything. We could have made more of everything. Any point that's beyond the line, here, 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 that's going to be impossible because we don't have the labor hours to make any more than these numbers of cell phones and tablets. Remember, the production possibilities frontier is called that because it's the frontier, the limit of all of our production possibilities, all of the possible combinations we could produce. And then point C, your point that is a reasonable production point, could be anywhere along here. It could be here, 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 literally anywhere. That is both possible and efficient. Any point on the PPF is a reasonable production point. Remember, when we did the games from trade, we had Japan make only computers, and that was a reasonable production point. Okay? So hopefully that's a nice review of the PPF. The last question asks about efficiency wages. And we spent a little time reviewing efficiency wages in class and talking about them. The thing to remember about efficiency wages is that they are above equilibrium wages that are paid in order to make the firm more productive. So remember, we have some labor market where there's some quantity of labor and some wages. And then there's some demand for labor. That's going to be jobs. And there's some supply of labor, people who want to work. And there's an equilibrium, quantity and wage. Above equilibrium wages can come from minimum wage laws, unions, or efficiency wages. Efficiency wages are wages above equilibrium paid by the firm for more efficient workers. We have 4 theories that explain them. One is worker health. Pay them more, they're healthier, they buy more food, they sleep better, they're more efficient at work, right? Number 2 is attracting the best workers. The higher the wage you pay, the more people are going to want to work at your place. And so you're going to get the best of the best applying, and you get to pick whoever you think is truly the greatest. There's a turnover question. Higher wages mean workers are going to be happier to work there. They're going to be less likely to quit and go work somewhere else. They're going to say like, oh, I like this job. It pays me more. And then the last one is worker efficiency, which is basically saying, hey, if you pay workers more, they're less likely to shirk. They're going to be more afraid of getting fired. So you don't have to monitor them as closely because you're paying them so much that they're happy to work there. They want to make this money, not this money. So they're not going to do a bad job. They're going to do a great job to keep their job, right? To stay employed and not have to go work somewhere else. So that's efficiency wages. That's the midterm review problem. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's a nice review for everybody. Let me know what questions you have. And I look forward to seeing you all Monday, November 1st in class for the midterm. Let me know what questions you have, please. Okay, take care.